Hey there, it's Wendy, and I'm here to show you how I took my student loans from $100,000 down to zero using the Public Service Student Loan Forgiveness Program, the PSLF. This program is one that the government has just extended until October, and I want to tell you how you can use this information about qualifying payments, qualifying employment, and the process to get your loans from whatever they're at down to zero.
So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is something that a lot of people don't qualify for because they don't necessarily work in public service. So it's the first thing. And I've had some folks ask, well, what kinds of roles do people qualify for? So one thing that I didn't even think of is veterans actually are clearly listed in there. Any military service, if you are obviously like military service, probably I would assume on your early discharge, um, it's clearly listed as a designation, and I did not realize because I have so many veteran friends, I didn't even think to be like, "Hey, do you even have any student loans?" 'Cause I know so many of you used other programs, but just FYI. And then the other group that I didn't think about besides nonprofits was people who had worked in some sort of religious-based nonprofit organization, even like people who are in ministries. And I actually do have a fair number of people who I've worked with who are in their own ministry now, but might have worked in another organization before. So these are the kinds of examples of people who may not think that they could benefit from this program, but actually could be using this benefit. So, so that's one of the things that I wanted to mention today is that there are a lot of people who qualify under public service, and you have to have worked for 10 years in a designated organization that fits in one of these classifications. And you can go on the Department of Ed's website and it'll show you what organizations fit into it. And it clearly says for profit businesses, contractors of the federal government, or contractors under a nonprofit do not fit. So those answers are pretty definitively clear. Now, the next part of it is that you have to have done a certain number of payments in a certain plan, right? And initially, before the waiver that's going on right now until the end of October, and this is the other thing I should mention, there's currently a waiver, and the way that I qualified was because I fit under the waiver. So I'll talk about my story in a second. But the second part of the program is that you've had to make 120 payments that fit their classification and the requirements that they have set forth with the types of loans and the types of repayment programs that they have in the overall loan forgiveness program. Now, under the waiver, what they did was they said, okay, if you don't have this type of loan, we will allow you to put your loans into a consolidation program that makes them qualify. And that's the first thing that I had to do because my loans were so old. They were a different type of loan that people don't even use now. Like it's not even a thing, not backed by the Department of Education, like old people loans, right? And so they didn't fit into this program when they created it because I think this program honestly was created to like limit how many people benefit from it. There was some ridiculous types of things going on with the program. But anyways, so a bunch of people didn't qualify simply because they didn't have the right type of loan, which is, you know, absurd, right? That you would have to have known in grad school or in undergrad to pick a particular lender with a particular loan because maybe later somebody will let you get your loan forgiveness. Like that really is not great logic. But besides fine. When I went through the program the first couple of times and when it was first created in like 2007 or 9 or whenever that is, I kept asking about this part of it because I was like, "Well, can't I just consolidate my way into this other thing that you want me to be, right? Like, why can't I just get another loan?" And there was some sort of rule that said that you couldn't, like, if you've already consolidated once, you couldn't reconsolidate. So I was always stuck with that part of it, right? So that was one part. And then the second part of it that I mentioned is that they had to have a qualifying repayment plan, right? So you had to make 120 payments. And on top of the loan being a certain type of loan, you had to make a certain type of payment, right? And that payment was in a graduated income. Now, when I started in the federal government, I started as a GS9 at $45,000. And this was just out of grad school, right? So I was making less than 50K as a professional. And I worked my way up to well over six figures. But in the process, my student loans were always at least $600-700 a month, right? Like always. And I would always pay more. And I can like, I'm going to show the hack that I have to pay more. So if you don't get loan forgiveness, this is something you can actually use. The thing was, I still was always uncomfortable, no matter how much I made, with how much of the percentage of my income was going to student loans, right? Like, 'cause imagine if I could have invested all of that money. It was like ended up being about 74, almost 75K that I paid myself. And that was because I would overpay all the time. So anyway, so I was in not a income-based repayment plan. I was in a repayment plan that was just pay every month the same amount, which to me made the most sense. I'm paying my loans. I'm like, here, indebted to you forever. I'm doing my job as a human, whatever. I'm sending you money, not going to debtor's prison. With these student loans, like I always was in the wrong type of loan, wrong type of repayment plan, and could never get loan forgiveness. And this went from 2007 until now before this actually got resolved. And the only way it got resolved is because the waiver program that's currently in place. Now, originally they told us this waiver program would go until August, which is why I was on top of it. In February, I consolidated into the correct type of loan. I waited, I called multiple times. I made sure they got all my stuff. While they were doing that, I had my employment verified because my employment was with a former employer who I'm no longer working for. So that process took at least a month and a half to get the correct verification and to get the application in, have the employment verification in, which is a separate process. Then, once all of that comes in, they review it together. And then I waited about 2 months for the final, like, well, actually, I waited a month and a half for them to say, hey, I have your paperwork. And then another month for them to say, oh, yeah, you have everything and we're reviewing it. And then eventually, like 2 weeks later, I got an approval. So it was kind of a lag, and in there, I called about 5 times, or maybe probably about 4 or 5 times, yeah, and every time I waited at least an hour to 4 hours on hold. I was consistently transferred from one department to another because the phone numbers that are on the website for this program are not apparently the correct extension for the actual program, so you have to talk to one operator. They determine that you're supposed to be over with the public service loan forgiveness programs. Then you get transferred to the correct team, and then you wait all over again for several hours, right? The reason I mention this is because part of the strategy, if you are not seeing movement on your actual application and you have applied to the program, which a lot of people have told me they have, one of the things you should probably be doing is actually calling and making sure that they are reviewing your application's moving forward. And then on top of that, if you have any other things that they have questions about, or if your employment verification isn't going through, you'll need to go back to your employer and get maybe the PDF signed again or something like that. Making sure you know that and you're doing that while you're waiting for them to do the next step. So never just wait for the process to go by and don't know where it is. At least log into your dashboard for Department of Education's website, and it'll tell you where you are in the process, and it'll tell you if you are missing any actual paperwork that's required for the program.